Welcome back, everybody, to the live webinar here at BINA. It's been quite a while, but it's good to be back together and learning together with you wherever you are. Just before we begin, just to mention that this is being streamed live on our YouTube channel. BINA has a YouTube channel, and we have hundreds of videos, both hundreds of webinars and other videos, short videos in Torah and Shiurim and classes. So subscribe. Underneath your video, there is a button. Press that button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you will get notified whenever we are live or whenever a new video is put onto YouTube. You will get notified and you will be able to watch from our YouTube channel. So welcome to the new series, which is the 13 Principles of Faith. We're going to go through all of them, please God, in depth, and this will probably take us a while, but that's fine. What we'll do today is a general introduction and a general overview of all the 13 Principles of Faith. Just first of all, what are the source of the 13 Principles of Faith? So the 13 Principles of Faith, known as the Yud Gimel Ikrim in Hebrew, is from the Rambam, Maimonides, the great Jewish codifier, the one who codified Jewish law for the first time in his 14 books known as the Yad HaChazaka. But he wrote many other works. And one of them was the Pirush HaMishnayos, his explanation to the Mishnayos, to the Mishnah. And in his explanation for the tractate of Sanhedrin, the Rambam brings over there the 13 principles of faith, what he calls the very foundation of our belief, upon which the entire religion of Judaism stands on. Later, it became known as the 13 Ani Mamins, like the most famous one, because of the song, Ani Mamin be'emunah shleima b'vias HaMashiach, that's number 12. The Ani Mamin, that actual word the Rambam didn't write, the 13 Ani Mamins are based on the 13 principles of faith, but they were sort of composed a little bit later, but it's sort of like a summary of the 13 principles of faith. Many people have a custom to say the 13 principles of faith in the form of the Ani Mamins on a daily basis, every day after the morning prayers. Some people don't, some people just think them, some people just contemplate them, but whatever the case is, these 13 Ani Mamins are the summary of the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. So before we get into what exactly they are, what we need to first of all do is ask two questions. First of all, why is it so important to have 13 principles of faith? Don't we have 613 commandments? Why did the Rambam deem it necessary to almost like summarize the entire Torah, so to speak, into 13 principles, or to give 13 foundations upon which the Torah stands? Why is it so important to do that? And number two, what does it mean that these 13 are the foundations, are the ikrim, are the fundamentals of Judaism? What, Shabbos is not fundamental? Keeping kosher is not fundamental? Well, they're not one of the 13 principles of faith. What does it mean that these 13 principles of faith are the foundations, the fundamentals of Judaism? Aren't there other very important components and aspects to our religion? Why does the Rambam seem to say that it's only these 13 that are the fundamentals? So let's answer the first question first, and that will sort of lead us into the second question. We all know that there are different, so to speak, streams within Judaism. There are Sfardim, there are Ashkenazim. There are Hasidic, there's non-Hasidic. There's ultra-Orthodox, there's modern Orthodox. So you have many, within Orthodox Judaism itself, you have many different streams, many different customs, many different sort of forms or ways of practicing our Judaism. Now, the truth is that when it comes to observance, actual practical observance, well, of course there are differences between all of these streams, but the differences are somewhat maybe less important and less pronounced. Meaning, okay, there's differences how to do this mitzvah. Do you do it that way? Do you do it this way? But the general mitzvah is the same mitzvah. Everyone puts on tefillin. Everyone keeps Shabbos. Everyone keeps kosher. When you get into the nitty-gritty details, there you have disputes. There you have differences. They have differences of custom, and obviously, all streams within Orthodox Judaism obviously are fine and good, all based on legitimate sources. But so in other words, the differences in practice is, in a way you can say, a lot less important and a lot less emphasized than the differences, what we call in hashkafa. Hashkafa means outlooks, perspective, what is Judaism? Let me just bring you an example, just a random example. If you were to ask the question, what is the purpose of the world? Why did God create the world? That's a very fundamental question. Well, if you open up a Tanya, written by Reb Shnei Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Hasidus, and you open up a Mesilas Yesharim, which is one of the great Musar works, well, you would have totally two different answers. And the two different answers are not just two different answers. These are two different perspectives on how to look at the world. And obviously, not one of them is not right or wrong. It's just two different perspectives of how to look at this very fundamental question of why did God create the world? But as I just said, there's no right or wrong here. Both are equal. Both are legitimate. Both were written by great sages, great people who were based in authentic, legitimate Judaism, and therefore both of those approaches are fine. But they're very, very different. And you live a lot of times these differences, this is just an example, but a lot of times these differences in attitudes and perspectives, that is what actually makes our differences much more pronounced. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, that could be actually a very good thing. That's what God wants. God wants us to serve Him in different ways as long as it fits under the guidelines of His Torah. But that's just the fact. That's where the differences are much more pronounced. That is why we need the Rambam to come and tell us the 13 principles of faith. Because yes, there are many differences when it comes to hashkafa, when it comes to outlooks and perspectives. But in these 13, that cannot be disputed. These 13, everybody must agree to, says the Rambam. No matter what, so to speak, what camp or what stream you belong to. You want to call yourself a stream in Judaism? It needs to be rooted, and you need to believe in these 13 principles. After you're done with these 13 principles, you can go and discuss, have theological debates, and debate why the world was created and all of that. That's fine. But the very fact, these 13 facts, these 13 principles that the Rambam tells us are the Yud Gimel Ikrim, the 13 principles of faith, that we have to believe in. That there cannot be differences. You can't say, well, I don't belong to that stream, so I don't need to believe in principle number 10. No, it doesn't work that way. These 13 principles is what makes us a believing Jew, is what makes us a part of the Jewish people. Or more correctly said, is what makes your stream of Judaism authentic, if it's rooted and you believe in these 13 principles of faith. Obviously, if somebody is born a Jew, or converted properly to Judaism, they're Jewish no matter what they believe, because Judaism is not about, the very fact that you're Jewish is not dependent on your beliefs or what you do. Here we're not talking about the individual, we're not talking about the person, we're talking about what makes your Judaism authentic, not what makes your Jewishness authentic. What makes your Jewishness authentic is if you're born from a Jewish mother or you converted halachically to Judaism. That's it, that's the only criteria. What makes your Judaism authentic is if it's rooted in these 13 principles, no matter what stream, no matter what part or sect of Judaism you belong to. And this will then lead us to answer the next very fundamental question. What makes these 13 so fundamental? Well, as we go through them, we'll understand this better. But let me just give you an analogy. You have a house. A house has many rooms, many functions. And let's say you have a house which is missing a kitchen. So it's missing a very important part of the home. In fact, a home without a kitchen is not really a functional home. You can't cook food, you can't even eat. A home without a bedroom is not a home because you can't sleep. And one of the things you do at home is you sleep. All right. Now, then there are things in a home which are less important. So let's say what color your wallpaper is. Well, to you it may be very important. To the person who's, let's say you're building yourself a new home and the color of the wallpaper which you chose obviously makes a difference to you. And you'll be very upset if the builders got it wrong. But you can't say that the house is not functional if you don't have the wallpaper. So there's things that go into the category of like what color paint, you paint your walls. Then there are things like having a kitchen and a bedroom. But all of these things are part of the functionality of the home. But then there's another thing, the foundations. The foundations don't make the house functional. The foundations make it a house. You take away the foundations, it's not that you don't have a functional home. You actually just don't have a home. The whole thing collapses and you just have a pile of rubble and you don't have anything. There is no home to even talk about. The same thing is when it comes to Judaism. And perhaps the analogy is not 100% correct, Because when it comes to Judaism, every part of Judaism is important. There's no such thing as, oh, it's only a minor detail, it's only a custom, it's only a minhag, it's only a rabbinic mitzvah, it's only, there's no such thing. Everything in Judaism is important. However, within importance itself, there are levels. So there are things which would be, so to speak, like the wallpaper. In other words, let's say I don't eat milchiks on Shavuos. There's a custom to eat milk and cheese on Shavuot. Let's say I don't do that. Now, to say that that doesn't matter is incorrect. Of course it matters. It's a custom. Not only is it a custom, it's a custom which is brought in Shulchan Aruch, in the Jewish code of law. Customs are very holy and are rooted in deep things and are very fundamental to Judaism. However, if someone doesn't eat, didn't eat this year, milchiks on Shavuot, their Judaism is at least functional. If you're keeping Shabbos, you're keeping kosher, you have the basics. At least you have, you have a kitchen, you have a bedroom. It's a functional home. Let's say you take away Shabbos, take away, not that you don't believe in it, but that because believing in it is actually one of the 30 principles of faith. But let's say you don't have it, you're missing it. Well, that's a deep flaw in the home. That's a very flawed Judaism. That's a very dysfunctional Judaism. However, if you take away the 13 principles of faith, it's not that you have a dysfunctional Judaism, you actually just don't have a Judaism. The 13 principles of faith, if you want to summarize it into 3 things, because there are 13, but you can divide these 13 into 3 categories. You don't have to do it into 3, I'm just choosing to do it into 3. Belief in God, which the first 5 discuss the belief in God. God is one, doesn't have a body, there is a God, there's a creator, he's the first, all of that. Then there is the belief that God communicates his will to our world, to the human being, which is the idea of prophecy, the idea of the prophecy of Moses, which is the idea of the divinity of the Torah, the eternity of the Torah. And then number 3 is the fact that God cares and knows what we do, and he rewards and punishes us based on that. That's the third part of the 13 principles of faith. Without these 3 things, divided into 13, as we'll see, it's not that you have a dysfunctional Judaism, which is also, of course, very bad. No one's saying that if you're missing kashrut out of Judaism, that's good. Obviously, that's a very, very dysfunctional Judaism, and it has to be fixed. And obviously, everyone's on their own journey, etc. But eventually, the goal is obviously to keep all the mitzvahs. But without these 13 principles of faith, there's nothing even to talk about. There is no Judaism. Again, you're still Jewish. Everyone who's born a Jew or halachically converted to Judaism is Jewish, obviously. But there is no Judaism to discuss. The Jewish religion is the foundations. What makes our religion the Jewish religion are these 13 principles. Without these 13 principles, it's not only a dysfunctional Judaism, but it's just not a Judaism. If you don't believe in God, if you don't believe that God gave us the Torah, if you don't believe that God cares and knows whether we keep the Torah or not, if you're missing those 3 things, there's no Judaism. And those 3 things are divided, the Rambam divides them into the 13 principles of faith. So what I want to do today, for the remainder of for the next few minutes, is just to run through all of them. This is going to take us probably a few weeks, if not a few months, to actually properly go through all of them. But I want to just go through just a general run through of all the 13, so we have all the 13 clear, and then next week we'll start going into them more in depth on Monday. So the first one is that we need to believe that God is the creator, in the existence of God, that God created everything, nothing made him, and he created everything. The second one is, I believe that God is one. And that's a very deep one. That's very difficult to understand exactly what that means, but that God is one and there's no one else that has the oneness of God. Number 3 is that God does not have any bodily functions. He doesn't eat, he doesn't drink, he doesn't sit, he doesn't stand, he's not physical, he's not limited in the limitations that we have. Number 4 is that we need to believe that God is the first existence and the last existence. In other words, he's the first thing to exist and he will be the last thing even after. If everything would disappear, he would still be there. Number 5 is that we need to believe that only to God do we pray and do we serve. We do not pray or serve any other entity. That all goes under, the first 5, as I said, all go under the idea of believing in God. That's the first idea, divided into 5. The second idea is that God communicates his will to the human being. And that is number 6, that I believe that all the words of the prophets are true. That God communicated his will to the prophets. Number 7 is to believe with the uniqueness of the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. And when we get here, we need to discuss why is this such a fundamental. But that he is, so to speak, the father of all prophets. And everybody else follows him. Number 8 is that you need to believe that the entire Torah which we now possess was given to Moshe Rabbeinu by God on Mount Sinai. Number 9 is that I believe that we need to believe that the Torah will not be changed and no other Torah will ever be given to us by the Creator. Number 10, so stop here for a second. All of that goes into the category of the Torah, knowing that God communicates his will to the Jewish people and that the Torah is divine and everything that's in the Torah is divine. And we need to discuss what that means when we get there. Now we get into the third aspect of the 13 principles of faith, this that it matters to God and God knows what we do. So the next thing is that we believe that God knows every single thing that we do. He knows the deeds and the thoughts of the human being. Number 11, we believe that God rewards and punishes those who keep or don't keep his commandments. Number 12 and 13 seemingly are part of those rewards but are fundamental within themselves. That number 12 is that I believe in the coming of Mashiach. And number 13 is that I believe in the revival of the dead in Tchiyas HaMesim. That's an overview of the 13 principles of faith. What we're going to do on Monday is we're actually going to start with number 8. The reason why we're going to start with number 8 is because, in a way, everything really comes from number 8. Because number 8 is the divinity of the Torah, the revelation on Mount Sinai. That everything that it says in the Torah is from God. If you're missing that, it'll be very difficult, although not necessarily impossible. You can still believe in God without believing in the revelation on Mount Sinai. You can have a theological argument for that. But it's still much more difficult, and the reason why we believe in God, and in Judaism we believe in God, is mainly because of the revelation of Mount Sinai, and everything else sort of surrounds that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start from number 8, the divinity of the Torah, and then move on to number 9, that the Torah is eternal, and then we'll take it from there, and we'll see which ones will go more into depth. Till then, have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos, and we'll see you again on Monday at 12:30 p.m. Don't forget before you leave to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can be notified when a new video is happening live or a new video is uploaded to our channel. Have a wonderful day.